very, very warm welcome to you, Vinita ma'am. It's like a dream come true to have you speaking to my leadership team, which is again a very, very upright and bright team that you'll be interacting with today. So just to give a brief introduction, it's very difficult to say too many things about Vanita because she in herself is an encyclopedia. Let me tell you, you will realize as things move on. So an international educator for 30 years, Miss Vanita Uppal OBE is the director of the British School, New Delhi. She is the proud recipient of the Order of the British Empire in recognition of her services to British education in an international context, becoming the only Indian service principal to receive this honor. A recipient of the Women Achiever of the Year Award in 2009, she is a trainer in classroom pedagogy and leadership and has presented at prestigious international forums such as the Cambridge International Examinations in UK and Sri Lanka, Global Round Square in Canada and Germany, BET Asia Leadership Summit in Kuala Lumpur, just to name a few. She has served as honorary secretary to FRS and currently sits on the executive board of Federation of British International Schools of Asia. She is a member of Headmasters and Headmistresses Conference UK and heads the IB and IGC SC networks in North India, encouraging innovation, honoring rich traditions, trusting in the power of collaboration, and leading with integrity and compassion are the core elements of her educational philosophy. To serve, to make a positive difference is her mantra. And on a personal note, I must tell all of you all that she's an extremely nice person, very forthright, very, very practical in her approach. And I thought it was very, very important for us to listen to Vanita ma'am because she also has an international perspective since she heads an international school. And I think her problem-solving attitude, not to live in the domain of problems, but to come to the domain of solutions is probably her biggest strength. So thank you so much, Vanita ma'am, for agreeing to be a part of this Shiksha Ka Naya Daur, Are We Ready series that we are hosting almost every week. Thank you for coming. Thank you for agreeing to be here. So over to you, Vinita ma'am.
Amrita, thank you so much for that very, very warm introduction. Let me just tell everybody, Amrita has made me out to be a lot more than I am. I am just somebody who's very passionate, like all of you around this Zoom room, whatever we call it now, about children and about education. And I don't think there is anything else I would like to do or love to do than what I currently do. So I think it's that passion, it's that love for education that takes me to what Amrita calls me to be a forthright and with a problem-solving mindset, which I think is key to success for any school educator, or for that matter, for any human being actually. So huge thank you, Amrita, for inviting me. I know it was meant to be in March and I was meant to be physically in Varanasi, but these are the times we are living in, but at least delighted to be with your team virtually. Thank you so much.
Right. So, ma'am, would you like to first address us or should we go on to the questioning part?
Just go on to the questions because I think everybody's webinared out. Right. I don't have that much. I'm not an oracle of Gyan, so more than happy to take questions and take it from there.
Okay, so over to you, Aditya sir, for the questioning part. Aditya sir is going to be moderating.
Lovely. Morning, Aditya.
Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
Very well, very well. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It's such an honor and a privilege, I must say, to be sitting across a digital platform to be able to put forth a few questions, ma'am. I have Absolutely. Always, whenever I have met you, I have seen this huge light of positivity that comes across from you, which at times really becomes difficult because we all are preoccupied with a lot of things being in the domain of teaching and in school. So I would like to begin with, ma'am, to first ask you, where does that abundant pool reservoir of self-belief and positivity comes to you? What is that secret of it? And also, ma'am, I have heard you speaking many times that it's only when we do ordinary things in an extraordinary way that we can inspire and motivate others. And why I ask this question is today, when every day you get up in the morning, you get up to negative news, you get up to India climbing to an unwanted fourth position and a third position and stuff like that. How do we keep that positivity going in this time when everything around seems so bleak?
Okay, Aditya, thank you for that question, because I think you've hit the nail on the head. Because without optimism, without positive energy, I don't think any problem in this world can be solved. Like every human being, more so for school leaders, you know, when we talk about leadership and education, we have to remember that as leaders, as human beings, where do we draw our strength from? What is our default mode? When we are in a crisis or we are in a daily life, where do we get our repertoire from? And I think it comes from your own value system. It comes from your own deep-rooted cultural belief. And in my case, I think I got it from my parents, like all of us do. And I remember my mother had this mantra in life, that there is no problem that doesn't have a solution. Some are more difficult to achieve, but other than life and death, there is no problem that doesn't have a solution. And I saw her enacting that in her life. So it wasn't just a cliche, and that kind of got embedded. The second element, I think, comes from my father, who I learned from, that a good head always has to be combined with a good heart. And these two principles, you know, and I remember when I first wanted to take up a job, and my father he was a little perturbed. He thought I was going to sit the civil service exam. And he says, but why do you want to go into a school and teach? Why do you want to work? And I said, well, I want to. I mean, I think it'll be interesting. And he said one thing to me. He says, agar naukri karni hai, to nakhra ghar chhod ke jana. And therein was the biggest lesson, that humility, no matter how big you become, don't abandon your humility. Because, you know, Aditya, even when you achieve something, you know, how you handle that achievement. Remember, you never achieve something on your own. There have been plenty of people in our journey who have helped us to get where we are. So don't forget to be grateful. Don't forget to be thankful that you haven't done this alone. Even many of us across the room are leading, you know, big schools, big classrooms, big organizations. There is no such thing as a one-woman army or a one-man army, right? Every leader is as good as his team. And therefore, when you have that faith, and my third pillar, or my third strand for my positivity, as you call it, is belief in people. I have the ultimate faith in people. I believe the best of everybody. Because my mantra is that if I'm an educator, I want to facilitate, enable every child, every teacher to become the best version of themselves. And I can't do that by just policies and structures. I have to believe in it. I have to have faith. Because if I don't have faith, the first people who will figure it out will be the children in your care, right? They will know that you're just saying it to make them feel good and you don't really believe in them. So that is very, very critical in my entire approach to life. And just the last one is the attitude of gratitude. In these unprecedented times, there is so much to be grateful for, especially in India, when you've seen such human tragedy unfold before your eyes. So what is our problem? The only problem is we can't go out. We are in our homes. Thank God you have a home to live in. So I think that is something that is very deep-rooted in me, and belief in spirituality, and the belief that, yes, there is a reason why you're here, etc., etc. I don't want to bore you with a longer answer, but that's where I come from as an educator. I can't hear you.
Aditya, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry. Today, when you go into a class, ma'am, today when a teacher goes into the class, with what three mindsets or what three beliefs should a teacher take with her or him in the classroom, so she actually affects another 40 odd mindset. And this time around, the beauty of these online classes is when a teacher speaks, it's not 40 odd individual, it's 40 odd households which are getting affected, whose positivity may rise. So to all the teachers who are today with us on the FB platform listening to you, ma'am, what are the three things that a teacher, besides her lesson plan, besides her...
Okay, there may be more than three. Aditya, will you be happy with that?
Absolutely. As many. Many.
So the first thing is, remember, you're not going in to teach a subject. You're going in to teach children, right? The second, content is not king. No child is going to remember what you taught them a year later. Teachers, I'm sorry, but that's the truth. What they will remember is how you made them feel. That did you actually invest in them? I say to my teachers, and obviously, I mean, at our school, we've got some apps, and I'm sure at your school, some absolutely amazing pedagogues, amazing classroom practice. And I say to them, you know, the children in your care will not learn a thing from you if they don't believe that you genuinely care about their progress. They have to believe that it matters to you how they are doing. Because I can have, you see, what has online learning shown? That everything is available online. Every bit of content is accessible online. Make yourself relevant. Why should, in these COVID times, schools be spending money, time, energy to develop protocols to reopen schools? Why? What is missing? What is missing is the human interaction. What is missing is the wonder. You remember the nursery rhyme, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? How I wonder what you are? It's that wonder of learning that we have to capture in a classroom. It has to be magical because children are passionate and curious. It is our duty to put a passionate adult in front of them. Because what is a teacher doing if she's not inspiring children to be better than what they are? You know, if there are so many historical, political figures who've had very humble beginnings. How could the son of a miner in South Africa dream of becoming the president? How? Because the teacher gave the opportunity. She planted that seed. She planted that imagination and creativity in the child. And if you can't do that, my biggest advice to teachers would be, if you don't love what you're doing, if you don't enjoy being with children, quit the profession. Don't be there. You're a waste of space. Your job is not to teach. Yes, you have to cover content. The content will come. Build the skills, build the attributes. You know that famous line in Three Idiots, you know, don't run after success, run after excellence. That is the mantra. That should be the mantra of every teacher. When you walk into a class, especially online, please understand that you can't just replicate what you do in a physical classroom. We've all seen that. We just can't go, and we are not trained to teach digitally, right? We are trained to pick up social cues. We are trained to look into to a student's eye and say, hey, what did I just say? Were you listening to what I'm saying? That medium is no longer available and will not be available for a long time to come. But just look how our teachers have transitioned. Who are the teachers who've done the best? And this is my final point. Who are the teachers we remember? Who are the teachers, when you go back to your old schools, you want to meet? The teachers who knew you. The teachers who understood you. I had a student, because I believe every principal, every director is a teacher first. And anybody here who's in a leadership position and is not teaching, please change that right now. The magic of the classroom cannot be replicated by files behind your desk. Cannot be, right? So I remember I had this very passionate, I'm a teacher of history, okay? So very passionate footballer and basketball player in my class. And unfortunately, 3 days a week, my class used to be after his PE class. And if he had lost a match, or if he hadn't scored a goal, or he lost a basket, he would be walking into my classroom in his PE kit, red face, sweating and angry, right? How was I going to teach him Gandhi's non-violence when his mind was on that football pitch where he'd missed a goal? So I would spend 2-3 minutes as the class was walking in. That's the other thing I always do. I'm always there before my students. I'm there at the door to welcome them. And I'd say, okay, what happened today? He says, don't even ask. I don't want to talk about it. I said, but I do. What happened? What was it? And we talk about the game for 2-3 minutes. That's all it took. That's all it took. And I wasn't pretending. I was genuinely interested to see, why is this child so upset? How is he going to learn? Unhappy children don't make happy learners, right? What does every child want? Every child wants to feel happy, valued, and secure. And if a teacher who is controlling her learning environment wants to blame the system and the school and the policies for what she's doing in a classroom, again, sorry, quit the profession. Your classroom is your oyster, is your world. You are the leader there. The environment you create is up to you. Nobody is dictating that. And in that environment, if you can encourage the enhancement of skills rather than content, the enhancements of attributes rather than did you get that answer right, you will be the teacher who will make a difference to so many lives.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, in your opening address, you said, and again, I asked this in context of school leaders, teachers who all probably have the same high goal that set for them about making others better, right? But making others better is not a very easy job. In fact, for that, you don't have to be easy on people. So as leaders and as teachers, how do we know that how much is too much? Where is it taking the journey forward, or where is it leading to a breakdown?
I think the first thing as a school leader and as a teacher and as a practitioner, you have to be reflective. You see, you don't get better by accumulating years of experience on your CV. You get better by processing that experience. The first thing you have to absolutely abandon is the attitude of denial, right? You have to, as teachers, you always know when you've done a good class, right?
Sure.
You know when you've seen that, and you know when you weren't at your best. Don't slit your wrists because you are a leader of learning, right? If you put that in your practice, that will be role modeled to your students. You know, in our school, for example, we don't use red ink. We haven't used it for about 15 years. We use green, okay? And the idea is that you give qualitative feedback and not just a mark. So if you want to get your learners to do better, you've got to give them constructive feedback, which means as a learner, you have to give yourself constructive feedback and accept that feedback. As a leader, and that has been one of my mantras and the mantras of my teams, is that you never turn a blind eye to poor practice. Chalta hai, nahi chalega. Because you are dealing with children. So if I'm in grade 4, I only have one shot at being in grade 4. I'm not going to get that again, right? So what should be our attitude is you support, but you hold teachers to account. You support, but you challenge. And by challenge, I don't mean challenge that there is obviously a way. I mean, in our school, for example, we don't call it, we call it performance development. We don't call it performance management. Because what we are doing is that we are developing each one. The second bit is invest in your own professional development, right? You have to, if you are a teacher and you don't see yourself as a learner, you are in the wrong profession, because you have to constantly learn. And that is the learning. I remember when computers were introduced, right? I'm obviously, you figured I'm not a computer generation, right? I always said I can only think with a pen in my hand. And then guess what? Computers came. And you had to do everything on computers. But guess what? We are the tech dinosaurs. The kids are the tech wizards. So I would completely flip the power equation in a classroom when I would go in and say, guys, set this up for me. You know, Mrs. Uppal can't do this, right? So as a teacher, you are not the reservoir of all knowledge. A good idea is a good idea no matter where it comes from. And one of the things that in India, And I'm a very patriotic Indian, so don't get me wrong. One of the things in India is that teachers, all of us, have grown up thinking that, mujhse sawal pucha, you're challenging me. You know, questioning became a bad thing. If a student questioned you or asked a difficult question that you hadn't thought of, the child is not challenging your authority. You have actually done a wonderful job in inculcating that curiosity, that he or she wants to know more. I often ask teachers when I interview them that when your students leave your classroom, what do you want them to leave with? Okay, some will say, I want them to understand what I've said, etc., etc. Let me tell you, they don't get selected. What is the answer I'm looking for? That I want every learner to leave my classroom with a question unanswered. I don't want to answer all questions in the class. It's not that I don't know, and if I don't know, I should say I don't know. There is no harm in saying knowledge has grown by leaps and bounds. You can't know everything about everything, right? But if you've created that curiosity in that child who says, why did she say this? I don't agree. Let me go up and look it up. That is when you planted a seed. That is when you've engaged a learner. That's when you've become a teacher.
Right. So again, ma'am, to what you said, primarily, I also understand that it's absolutely important to be honest in our communication and interaction with our students, and also with other staff members, other colleagues in the school. Because if we do not have the comfort of being honest, speaking out what we have in our mind, the climate of the school always suffers.
Correct. And can I just add a point here, Aditya?
Absolutely, please, ma'am.
And I think that is where the school culture comes in. And that school culture, the tone for that is set by the school leadership. Culture has to be embedded for it to be imbibed by everybody, right? But the tone has to be set by the leadership. And when you are visible and accessible and honest and candid, and very importantly, respectful. You can disagree, but do it. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's how you say it. So if you are as a leader who's visible, who's accessible, who's encouraging ideation, who's not slamming down somebody who doesn't believe in your idea, you will inculcate that culture, Aditya, that you're referring to. That culture of openness, that culture of open dialogue. And in that, what happens is you lead by example, you establish your credibility as leaders. And I'm sure Amrita and the other leaders in the room will agree that very often you have to make very difficult decisions. Very often. Even if your decision making is collaborative and consultative, very often it's left to you to make that final executive decision, which is a difficult one, right? Now, when you make a difficult decision, if your team, your school culture is such that there is a relationship of trust and faith, that yes, if you have done this, there must be a reason. You must have thought of what is best for the children and the school. Even most difficult decisions are accepted. But that, Aditya, doesn't happen overnight by one dramatic event. It is built through over a period of time, through small incidents where people see consistency in what you've done. Very often, you hear this in offices and in schools. Yaar, aaj ma'am ke paas mein jana, mood kharab lag raha hai. Right? That's the worst model of leadership. Because it doesn't matter. We all carry emotional baggages to our workplaces. We all have families, we're all human. But as a leader, as a teacher, you have to be a bit of an actor. You have to have that same consistent calmness so that anybody who comes into your room, good day, bad night, good night, doesn't matter. They have a right to expect predictability. It is their right. It should not be dependent on your mood. It is their right to expect that, yes, if I go into her with this problem, that's how it will be addressed. And I think that is absolutely critical. You can't be, leadership or teachers don't have the luxury of giving into mood swings. You don't. So if you're planning to stay in education, remember your problems will be yours, The problems of others will be yours, right? Because that's your job. But do not become that person who people are afraid to come and approach because she's or he is in a bad mood.
Right. Right. Thank you, ma'am. It didn't happen in March. Let's say we get over this, and I'm sure we're going to get over this very soon. And in the next few months, you once again visit our branches, you walk into any of our schools and spend the day in our school premises. Being such a seasoned educator, what are the things that you will actually look for to certify that this school has a vibrant, positive culture?
Happy children. Happy children, happy teachers. And if you have that, you can surmount anything. Because you can't fake that, Aditya. You can't
Right.
fake that. And happiness, I don't mean smiling children. I mean that joy, that engagement that you see, anything is insurmountable. Once the community is collectively engaged in that one mission, that yes, we are all here to learn, we are all here to get better. Of course, we all have different journeys to make. Who cares? As long as you're, it's being on the same bus. It's having the right people on the bus. It's knowing the destination. We can take a few detours. We can try one route or another. Find that didn't work. We have to change the route, but not the destination. And the destination always has to be, we have to do what is in the best interest of the children in our care. There is no bigger cause than that. No bigger cause than that.
Thank you. Happy children and happy teachers. So that's basically the yardstick of a good culture in a school. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, I have two more questions to ask. And since you mentioned this partly, that while going in a class, leave all the files back in the offices or back in the staff room. So when I say files, I obviously mean maybe you've spoken about data. We today are talking a lot about data-driven decisions, data-driven leadership, data-driven response and intervention and differentiation. Ma'am, how much of data again is too much, and what do you rely on in your leadership role? How much of data, how much of intuition, and how much of observation?
That's an excellent question, Aditya, because decision-making has to be data-driven. You cannot make arbitrary decisions. Now, say, for example, the decision, we were probably one of the first schools in the country, I dare say, that sent out the first health advisory on the 24th of Jan. The coronavirus was announced on the 21st of Jan, right? So in this, especially when you're in a crisis, you have to rely on authentic and reliable data. This can't be my gut, it can't be my instinct ki haan, aaj school khol lete hain, aaj theek lag raha hai. You can't do that, right? So data is critical when you're making policy decisions. But the important thing is for every leadership to understand what is the data that you want to use. There is no end of data collection. But how are you going to use the data and what data is important, right? Now for student progress in a school, right, you need data. So say, for example, at our school, we use standardized testing, we use our own formative and summative assessments, but the word that you used, Aditya, observation, is critical. So our teachers, I know, I'm not sure whether CBSE still does, is doing predicted grades, but for the IB and the IGCSE, you have to arrive at a predicted grade for every student. How do you arrive at that grade? How do you give we never just give a numeric grade. We just don't say, okay, 15 on 20 means, okay, you got 75%, therefore this is the grade you fall in. No, it's holistic because you're mapping it to a grade descriptor, which means you're constantly assessing the student holistically, right? The same is with teachers. When we are assessing teachers, when we are doing their performance development, we are not just looking at the targets they are setting. That's the data for you, that you've set a SMART target. This is what you did. This is the action. But what am I also looking at is competencies. We have a competency framework, right? So you might be delivering, you might be able to teach points of inflection supremely well, but you are a teacher who demotivates her students. Now that's a key competency that is critical, right? So you have to me, that is more critical, that how are you inspiring students? So data usage can be overdone or underemphasized. Both, I think, are pitfalls that you have to avoid. You have to rely on research and data for making systemic decisions. You have to. Now, when the crisis escalated with COVID, and when we are de-escalating the crisis, what are we looking at? We are looking at models of best practice from elsewhere. We are looking at research that is being published. You're identifying what is the best quality research that you want to depend on. Now, in the absence of that, you're not going to rely on WhatsApp and fake news, right? So that is critical. But if I am making an assessment about a student's performance or a student's ability to get a higher grade, I'm not just going to look at what the numeric is telling me. I'm going to base my decision on my interactions, on the potential I see in the student. So I think, I don't know whether that answers your question.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Without data, you will only set up a mom and pop show. You will not set up an institution. If you want policies and systems, you need data to drive that. But data alone will not ensure success, because schools at the end of the day are about people. And if you don't get the people bit right, no policy or structure is going to matter.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, one of the last questions that I have to ask you is, today, disruption seems to be a buzzword. Everyone's talking about disruption across fields, education especially. Do you think, again, as an educator who has seen the way education has progressed in India, that for long we as schools have patiently sat doing what we are doing very well, not reacted or not being proactive, and today we find ourselves in a bit of a mess trying to do the catch up? And what other disruptions do you see in the coming future that we should be ready of from now itself?
I think you've used the right word. It's disruption like nobody wanted, nobody anticipated, nobody was prepared for. Okay. And again, we use data. Even before the lockdowns were announced, we had trained our teachers on Microsoft Teams. Because we are a school, we believe a lot in integrating technology into our learning. We won international awards for that, but that's not the point. Up until now, technology was a tool that you used or you didn't use. It was up to you, up to when it suited the pedagogical style. Now, it is the medium. It is no longer a tool. It is the medium through which you're going to communicate. So my point, my one guiding philosophy is that the one thing you cannot do, please don't do a patch-up job like we are brilliant at. The fault lines are too visible. You're not just putting a tanka on a garment, you have to restitch a new garment, right? You have to restitch a new garment with skills which will still hold you in good stead. So as a school leader, what I want to do is connect the dots. Establish a synergy between current practice and future aspirations. That learning needs to be redesigned, reimagined. Jitne bhi re-words aajkal chal rahe hain. Reimagine, rethink, reboot, re-energize. All that is fine. But don't forget one critical thing. And that is, keep it contextual. There is no point in importing practice which doesn't suit your context, because then it's a waste of time and money. Learn from others, but contextualize it. The other day I was at the Ashoka University panel, and they were talking about this digital divide, that some have access, some don't have access. How do you, now, there is this movement, let's stop online classes. So if COVID doesn't go for 2 years, students won't learn. I mean, that's a different debate. I'm not getting into that. So this gentleman from a city in Madhya Pradesh said, he was in a school where children didn't have laptops at home, didn't have internet and connectivity. You know what they did? And the teachers thought of this. They started putting worksheets on the Chopal notice boards, where everybody was accumulating every day. And I said, this is mind-blowing. This is design thinking at its best. So design thinking doesn't mean I need to have a laptop in front of me. It means I have to do the thinking here. The design has to develop here. We are teachers. We are not activity designers, right? We are planters of seeds. We are, people who curate imagination. So, and you will see that if you engage with your students, the way children who have adapted, the creativity and innovation they have come up with, you have to get them in that space that they can think that, yes, I can do this. Oh, wow, can I try this? And that doesn't happen through static, behind the desk, a rote delivery. It doesn't. Teachers now have to work doubly hard, and they've been doing that because they are trying to recreate the magic of a physical classroom in an online world. But teachers who are listening, don't forget that. Don't think that if you teach half an hour less, they will learn less. Teach less, prescribe less, they will learn more. Build them into independent learners, engaged learners, they will learn much more. The other day, there was a debate on the OP Jindal webinar that don't you think students are going to be left behind? There is going to be a knowledge gap, with this online and I said, but then you're answering the question yourself, because the most important learning that all of us as educators have seen is the unwritten curriculum. And that there is no falling behind on. Look at what children have learned in this short time. How to adapt, how to be resilient, how to cope, how to look out for others. So that learning will never fail them, never. So have faith in the young people.
Right. Thank you, ma'am. And before I hand over the session to Amrita, ma'am, just one last question for all of us, all the principals, all the academic heads, all the teachers. If you had a checklist of how the online classes are going in, what would be the 4 things or 3 things that you can speak of, and then we can tick and say, yes, we are doing a great job?
Okay. One is engagement of students. 2 is quality assurance. 3 is guaranteeing that each child is making progress. And 4th, the human connect. No child should be left behind, should be your mantra even now.
And ma'am, how do we measure the second and the third point, ma'am, the quality assurance, and how is the child doing?
See, quality assurance, of course, happens with the leadership, and more than happy to talk about our experience. So say, for example, in Microsoft Teams, we would ask teachers to invite members of the leadership team into their classes, and we would observe, give feedback, and take parental feedback, take student feedback. Critical, absolutely critical. And what was the second thing you asked me?
Ma'am, your third point was how is the child faring? How is the child doing?
Absolutely, because when you're doing synchronous and asynchronous learning, you are also keeping a track of their engagement in lessons. You are keeping a track of the work they are doing, right? It's not that all assessments have stopped. Remember, this is another disruption to the Indian education system,
Yes.
that there is no end of year exam. What if that gets cancelled? So as learning is ongoing, assessment has to be ongoing. So you all have your parameters of measuring progress, but measure them against each child, and no generic measure. That 5 on 10 means that you can't stand the word average, can't stand that word. Nobody in our school uses it. There is no such thing as an average child or an average performance. That word doesn't exist in our vocabulary, because there is no such word as average. You're getting better, or you are good at this, you'll get better at, and if you do this, you will even get better at this. That is the dialogue.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so very much. It's been such an honor to speak to you. I'll request Amrita, ma'am.
It's been a pleasure, Aditya. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, it was absolutely amazing, wonderful, always a pleasure listening to you, and very thought-provoking, let me tell you. Very, very thought-provoking, Vinita.
Thank you, Amrita.
So I just thought I'll butt in the middle, sorry, because in the beginning I forgot to introduce my chairman and director to you. I see them there, they are here with us. So I'll just request Bharti ma'am to come on and just say a namaskar, a Jai Hind, and Deepak sir also please to come on and say a Jai Hind to her. After which we'll just go on with the questions. And in the meanwhile, I guess people will mull with the questions. Bharti ma'am, if you can please come on for a second.
Yeah, good morning and Jai Hind. And
Jai Hind, good
Mrs.
morning, ma'am.
Uppal, very, very warm welcome to you. And I have been here from the beginning. I have not missed even a single word. But then because of the network connectivity issue, I had switched off both my things. So thank you so much. What you spoke was, so relevant as an educationist. We all must understand, and somewhere down the line, professionalism, people say when they talk about, what they are getting back in return. They only talk about that and they do not see the output that the child is getting. So once again, you're, bringing us back to the reality and the fact that all of us, if a school is existing, if all of us are going to school, spending time there, what are we looking forward to? And I think you rightly said it is the child. We are all here. Ye sari kainat should be for the children, and it should be around the children. And our word is
Absolutely.
our school, our institution. So thank you, ma'am, for each word. It just hit the nail.
Please don't call me ma'am.
Right.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And also one thing I wanted to ask you when you were talking about, you remember your old teachers. I remember one Mrs. Uppal, and that is why I made sure when I was in class 2, she was my maths teacher. And till date, I remember, because that was the only class I did well in maths. After that, I'm sorry, I could not do anything in maths.
Yeah,
So,
teachers make a huge
Mrs. Uppal,
difference.
yeah,
Huge
it
difference.
does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am, for your time. And
Thank you for
we
having
would
me.
like to invite you to Varanasi one of these days.
I'm going to get there sooner or later. I will.
Sure.
Don't worry. That's a
Thank you
promise.
so
I have
much.
to get there.
Thank you. Thank you
Right.
so much.
So,
Chairman, sir.
yes, sir. Sir, if we can say, just speak a few words and we'll go on to the questions, please. Deepak sir, is he around, ma'am?
Sir's audio is muted.
Okay, he's speaking though, I guess.
Yeah. All right. I would just like to reinforce what Bharti ma'am said just now. A warm welcome and invitation to visit Varanasi stands. And we also learned a lot of things. It's a teacher has to be a learner as well. And when you said an admin who doesn't go to the class, so that is what my thoughts always are, that admins and principals should always take a few classes. They should always connect with the children. And everything is turned topsy-turvy. The world flag is now a mask. And we can see that the Third World War, no one realized is going to be between COVID versus Homo sapiens. So that is it. And COVID doesn't discriminate between anyone. It's there in Africa. It's there everywhere. So these are the new learning points we have now. Thank you so much. We learned a lot of things, my teachers, my principals, everyone. So please carry on with the questions.
Yes,
Thank you.
so
Thank
much.
you so much. Thank you so very much.
so much, sir.
Pleasure to listen to you.
Aditya sir, over to you for the questions. I think there are some raised hands.
Yes, ma'am. Gurmeet ma'am, Vinita ma'am, Gurmeet ma'am is the principal of Sunbeam School, Bhagwanpur. She has a question for you. Gurmeet
Sure.
ma'am, please.
Sure.
Good morning and Jai Hind, ma'am.
Jayant, I can't see. There you are. Right.
Ma'am, Delhi government came up with the happiness curriculum.
Correct.
And overall, in your interview, you said that, happy children in the classroom, in the school is what makes it. Do you think that happiness curriculum was as such required to be an extra added thing which needs to be brought up?
I don't know the motivations of the government, but I think maybe they were addressing a gap, because I think at times we take certain things for granted. You assume that when children go to school, they are happy. You assume when they come back, they are happy. But I think in today's world, ma'am, if something that's become very, very evident is that there is the entire notion of well-being. And I think this was a deliberate attempt to put well-being at the center of a child's development. And if you ask me, I think the focus has come in a little late because I don't know, I'll just share a statistic with you. Delhi currently, at least even before COVID, had the highest number of teenage depression. The number of cases was the highest in Delhi. Delhi teenage girls had the highest incidence of self-harm, right? So it is a very, very real, palpable problem, which very often, as you can see, parents are helpless. It's not that the parents are always at fault. You know, there is no
Yes.
combative relationship between parents and schools. We all want the best for the same child, right? But at times, and you would have noticed that, parents come to you and say, "Main kya karu?
Yes.
I don't know what to do." There
Yeah.
is no training manual for parenting, right? It's by trial and error. At times you get it wrong, you get it so badly wrong. And therefore, I think a focus in a structured manner on saying, guys, happiness and well-being is important. Don't discard it. There's so many cases of student suicides, which we've been hearing about over the years. And
Yeah.
very often it's stress, it's pressure, whatever be the reason for such unfortunate things to happen. If the child is spending 6 to 8 hours with us in school, it is up to us. And that's why I was saying to somebody the other day that even if you want to reopen schools, is it safe to reopen if there is no vaccine for COVID? And my
Yeah.
answer to them was, you need to open schools because schools are not just teaching content,
Yes.
right? You need that. But I say to my teachers that you have to make it worth it. Why will I come to school if what you're giving to me in a classroom,
Yes.
I can click on an app at home and get it? I
Sure.
don't need to come. So the onus is on us. And I think well-being and happiness, if we ignore it any longer, ma'am, we'll do so at our own peril. We'll do so at our own peril. And remember this, the state of government schools has, actually improved a lot in Delhi. And if 50% of the students are going to government schools and there is a deliberate focus on happiness there, I think as a nation, we will benefit from this, not tomorrow, not day after, but we will definitely see the benefits of that.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Gurmeet ma'am. Thank you so much for the question and Valda ma'am for the answer. Amrita ma'am has a question, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aditya sir. So, Vinita ma'am, I just wanted to ask this question to you. I'm not, it's a little different. It's about careers of children, and especially coming from you because a lot of your children go abroad to study because of the nature of the school. So some of my children are also, they have taken admissions abroad or are even thinking in class 11 are now thinking about abroad, but now have started back, trekking on that. They feel that I don't want to go abroad. I don't want to travel. I don't want to stay there. I don't know. There's no security. There's no certainty. So how could I, personally, I feel probably it's worth taking a risk. Okay, I'm not very sure about that. So what do you think I should tell my children who are planning to go abroad or are now planning not to go once they've got admission? What would you say to your kids?
I think, again, Amrita, the correct guidance is critical, like you said, and that's what you want to provide them. I think context is going to be critical. Absolutely, it's going to be critical. Because for some, you see, if you do send an unwilling, uncertain, fearful young person who has never lived outside the family home, right? And a lot of people just send their kids abroad, just, okay, you need to stand on your own feet and become independent. Yes. In normal times, yes. When times are so unprecedented, right? The same formula cannot apply. The same formula definitely cannot apply. Yes. You have to be very careful that you take the pick. Now, if you're planning to go to a country, say, for example, you got admission in Denmark, or you got admission in Finland, or you got admission in New Zealand, there is no problem. Yeah, those countries have recovered. They are well on their way. If you were going to New York, right, and quarantines were going to happen and flights were going to get canceled, you right now have the luxury to postpone that decision for a year, right? You have the luxury. A lot of students, and I'm sure you've been reading the literature on this, many universities in the US, Canada, UK have announced that they're going online for the first semester. Some have said we are going online for a full year. If you were going to get the campus experience, which is such a great part of university life, and like you, I'm a complete fan of that is critical. I didn't get it, I wish I had, right? But I would love to kind of, be on a campus for 4 years and imbibe that experience. But if that experience is going to be truncated and not the experience I'm looking for, and I'm going to do it with this fear, anxiety, I would postpone the decision. I would take a gap year. I would either go for my master's, wait for the situation to pan out. There is no hurry. If I'm not going to go there tomorrow morning, if my flight is not for tomorrow morning, there is no hurry. But would I say, I would definitely say, when you can, get that experience. There is no substitute for that.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. Good advice.
Reena ma'am, Reena Vikram Singh, it's Sandeep Indiranagar. Reena ma'am, your question please.
Good morning, ma'am.
Hi.
Ma'am, just wanted to know that at times teachers really struggle between the content, syllabus, time, and when we talk about project-based learning, experiential learning. So I wanted to know right now, when the teachers are listening to you, I want you to tell them what should be the percentage of experiential learning, as well as what should be the percentage of the content, because at times they really juggle between the two.
That's one thing I will never do, because there is no such thing as a right percentage. Project-based learning, experiential learning, innovative pedagogy, encouraging critical thinking have to be part of your daily bread and butter. It's not an add-on. It's not an addition. It's not that, okay, I have done this now I will do project-based learning. That's now how it works. There are certain concepts that are best delivered by the teacher explaining that in a lecture method for 20 minutes. There is nothing to say that that is wrong or that is bad. There are certain topics, certain concepts that lend themselves to collaborative work. There are certain topics that lend themselves. How am I going to make something is not going to be best taught behind a desk. You get the kids to make it. That's common sense, right? There is no philosophy involved here. It's common sense. If I'm going to teach a concept like, okay, how do you respect a differing perspective, right? It's one thing the world needs right now, patient listening for different views. You want to teach that, right? In the IB at our school, it's part of our philosophy. You train children to understand different perspectives, appreciate different perspectives. How do you do that? You might say, okay, easiest thing done. I remember from my example, right? I'm a teacher of history. I was teaching the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? What did I do? One half of the class was representing Kennedy. The other half was representing Khrushchev, okay? And they had to debate their points. Tell me why the Cuban crisis is a victory for America. And you tell me why it's a victory for Russia. And you know what they had to do after that? They had to give their points. 15 minutes later, they had to switch sides.
And different perspective.
And understand why. So there's no rocket science here. It is just knowing what is best. What is your aim? You want them to understand that there is no such thing as a black and white answer, right? Suppose that was your learning outcome, that you wanted them to be able to evaluate 4 sources and come to their own opinion, right? Independent learning and thinking doesn't happen independently. It has to be encouraged, right? So, and you have to be trained. Everybody say, okay, go to the internet and do a research project. The worst punishment you can inflict on a parent, because the child is not doing the research, the parent is doing the research. The child hasn't learned a thing, right? How do you train children to do guided research is again another skill that teachers must inculcate. Now it is imperative because they're doing their entire work on, you wait for a few months, everybody will be only on online resources. Hard copies will probably cease to exist. because you probably won't get access to them. Printer is in lockdown, he can't print the books.
True.
What are you going to do? So there is no percentage, Reena, in my head. It has to be relevant and it has to suit the learning outcome that you have planned. But to say that I will only, that this can only be lecture method, no. Every classroom has to be a mix of 4 or 5 different pedagogical styles. Because why? You'll have learners who have 5 or 10 different learning styles. You have to reach out to every child. You have to, even though they are differentiated and you have classes of 40. I've taught in a CBSE classroom with 48 children. I've done that. But I would be damned if any one of them could come and tell me that they didn't understand what I was trying to do. Right? And that is the magic of teaching. That is the magic. So no percentages, Reena.
Right,
But
ma'am.
a very careful analysis of what suits the delivery of what concept. That's what I would do.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Reena ma'am, for bringing out that question and such a wonderful answer. May I request Ms. Parveen Kaisar, Principal Sunbeam Lehertara, to please put forth her question.
Thank you, Aditya sir. Good morning, ma'am. Ma'am, there were 2 words that you used and I kind of got stuck to those words, and I'll base my question on that and I would seek your help. You used the word intuition and observation. My take when I think about my teachers going into the classes, they do a lot of their teaching based on intuitions and observations when their children are right in front in the classes. Now on the online platform, ma'am, probably the silent child sitting in a corner and, you know, in one of the grids kind of gets missed out. So I would request you to please give some tips to my teachers to, you know, kind of help them in noticing that and not being ignorant of those silent
Absolutely.
children probably.
Absolutely. And that works in a physical classroom as well, ma'am. Because very often the kid who has the hand up is the one who's asked the question, right?
True.
So that is where a teacher's sixth sense. I always used to say to my students, I have a third eye and I have one at the back of my head. And they used to ask me that when you're right, that time, remember, I started my career 35 years ago, so it was still a choke, right? And they said, Miss, and I would know, when I was writing on the board, I would know who's asking me a question. Where did that come from? That comes from knowing your learners. And now, of course, there are now tools and strategies and surveys. And we have our own bespoke survey at our school where in the first week, that teacher floats that survey to every child. Okay, and those are statements where the child, simple statements like, I am good at, I can, I want to, you know, simple things like that. And the teachers will be expected to base their understanding of the learning style and the student based on just that simple exercise. Everybody can do it. There's no science, everybody can do it. And that gives you a sense, even when you're online, right? I don't know whether your school does this, but do you have a system that when a child, because you might have started a new academic year, right? So you might have a new set of students in front of you. Do you get any transition data from the previous class?
Yes, we do have that. These anecdotal records which we have of the students get transferred to the...
I am saying go beyond anecdotes. Go beyond anecdotes.
Right.
And so say, for example, a school like us, when we use, we have a very, should I say, very bespoke and I think a brilliant system of reporting. So those reports are shared. Okay, so there is a one-on-one. There are transition meetings. So say, for example, from 6 to 7, because in our system, the end of year 6 is the end of primary and year 7 is the start of secondary. So there would be a lot of time that year 7 teachers would be spending with year 6 teachers, even before the class comes in, right? So if some student has some learning needs, or somebody is a gifted and talented, or somebody has English as a second language, those students are easy to identify. There are records, there are registers for that. But what do you do about friendships? What do you do about how the child responds to criticism? How does the child respond to encouragement? Now, those meetings are held. Okay, so there are these records that are maintained, that are shared and passed on. So when you know that, yes, these are the 3 children who I know don't generally participate in a class, right? You're silent student.
Mhm.
The teacher has it in her projection book, in her lesson plan, that that's the student I have to reach out to. We also have an online, just to give you another bit of information, Seema, is that we do a catch-up one-on-one. And we did that more even with the primary students, because for them, the synchronous acres was a little difficult to manage at the start. So the class teacher, 5 students every day, she would have 5 to 10 minutes with each child, 5 students a day.
Okay.
And just do a catch up and see whether they were okay, were they learning, were they engaged.
Mhm.
And children with learning needs find it very difficult. So for them, we've had one-on-one sessions.
Thank you.
I don't know
This
whether
was-
I hope that answers your question.
yes, yes, ma'am. It will definitely help. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. May I request Ms. Shomita Chatterjee, Principal of Sunbeam School, Sarnath, to please go ahead and ask her question.
Good morning, Jai ma'am. Ma'am, I have one question.
You're not
regarding,
clear.
Teachers, basically.
I can't hear you clearly. Sorry.
Ma'am, am I audible now?
Yes,
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 better.
please.
Better, yes.
Good morning, Jai ma'am. I just wanted to know, ma'am, every good school speaks about different learning styles. And we also speak about teacher autonomy. But this is a question which I would like to pose. Like, how much of teacher autonomy do you provide in your schools, wherein there is minimum interference from the school leadership, and we completely rely on the teacher in delivering the learning outcomes to the child without interference?
I wish you had asked my teachers instead of me, but I'll tell you the system is that a teacher has 100% autonomy. She can deliver a concept the way that suits her teaching style, that she is best at. What we do, ma'am, is that we have curriculum teams, what you call departments. So the planning is done collaboratively. So maybe there are 3 teachers teaching grade 8. So, and they're teaching, say, Merchant of Venice or First World War or whatever. They will plan their lessons because what will they will be an agreement on the learning outcome. There will be an agreement on the concepts that have to be delivered. The how is left entirely to the teacher. Okay, now the next question that follows is, how do you do quality assurance? How do you make sure that you've given the autonomy and the teacher is nowhere near where you want it to be? That doesn't happen because this planning is collaborated. It is moderated by the curriculum leader. There are peer observations. There are lesson observations. There is constant feedback from students. It's a very fluid environment. So if a principal walks into a teacher's classroom, he or she is not looking at what the teacher is doing. They will be looking at what the learners are doing. We don't walk into classrooms to assess teaching. We walk into classrooms to assess learning. And then give feedback and say, okay, you tried this. Then have a conversation. You know, I saw that worked really well. Did you think of those 3 children who were not engaged? So what strategy? So these are coaching, mentoring conversations that follow. So in answer to your question, you cannot hope to inculcate creativity and innovation by being prescriptive. You cannot. At the same time, the leader's obligation is to make sure that every student is getting the best that he or she can. One of the yardsticks, ma'am, if you're in a leadership position, right?
Yeah, she's the principal of Sunbeam Sarnath.
Yeah, so one of the yardsticks that I've used when I was the secondary school principal, I used to say to my teachers that the day I stopped receiving requests from a parent to change their child's teacher, it means then we are consistent, excellent. It shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter whether my child's achievement cannot be dependent on the luck of the draw.
Right.
Am I still audible?
Yes, yes, yes. Ma'am.
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah, we seem to have.
Am I audible, Aditya?
Yeah, you're audible, ma'am.
Yes.
But yeah, it's okay.
Yes, it's fine now.
Hello?
Yeah, it's okay.
Fine now.
It's fine.
So there has to be consistency in what your teachers are doing. How they are doing it has to be up to them. But the quality, the proof has to be in the pudding that all students are learning the best way they can. That is the measure in my mind.
Right. Thank you, Shomita ma'am. And finally, may I request Aparna ma'am? She is one of the academic heads of Sunbeam Sarna. She has a question. Go ahead, Aparna ma'am.
Yeah, sure.
Good morning and Jai Hind, ma'am. It's
Morning.
really a very enriching session I'm attending today, and really the
Thank you.
encouraging, motivating words that you are saying. It's really, I'm
Thank
just
you.
salute to you. And now my question is, ma'am, after like 2.5 months of this online classes, now the children, especially I'm talking about the pre-primary children, ma'am, the kids are so attached with their teacher, and now they are so excited when they will come to school. And now it's very difficult to make them understand, especially the nursery kids who has, in their dream that one day I will go to school with my new bag and bottle, and they are so excited for that day. But that day has not come still. They are waiting for that. So, ma'am, how to
Right.
deal with the situation? Please, ma'am.
It's a very tough one, and the youngest ones, and that is the enthusiasm and energy you don't want to kill, right? So schools will look for innovative ways, I'm sure. But one of the things we are planning to do is to do much smaller sessions. Maybe just get in 5 or 6 children on one single day with their parent, and get them to meet the teacher, get the excitement, and roll that over, and get another set of 6 kids so that everybody gets to experience the campus. And I think one of the things that we'll have to continue to do online is to engage them through other ways. And my worry is that when like lockdown has opened, parents are going back to work, right? And for the youngest children, parents need to be at home for them to access online learning,
Yeah.
right? And the
Yes.
people, the section of society that's going to be hit the most are the women, because child rearing in this country is up to the women, right? So are we going to have fewer women in the workforce because they're staying back home to look? I mean, that is another reason why when we can, we should open schools.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, so that's what we are doing, ma'am. I don't know whether that answers your question, but the idea is to bring them in much smaller numbers and make sure that they at least get to meet the teacher. Because how do you tell a 3-year-old not to share and not to hold his friend's hand? I mean, the humanity has gone into reverse.
Definitely.
One of the virtues we were teaching children was you must share your things. And now you're saying, don't you dare share. So it's a bit topsy-turvy, the world right now.
Yeah. Okay, ma'am. Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am, for guiding me. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Amrita ma'am, any final word before I request her sir to please say a few words at the end?
I just wanted to say a very, very big thank you on a personal note to Vanitha. Believe me, it's not only been enriching and thought-provoking, I think it's been good guidance, somebody who's really answered questions, again, I repeat, with a practical approach. So thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. It's been, you clearly have a very committed and motivated team, Amrita. Really, what a privilege to lead them. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely our pride. I think we've got one of the most brilliant teams and very hardworking, very hardworking.
I think the greatest privilege I have, and I say that unashamedly, is to lead the team that I do. It's absolutely, wouldn't do it with any other team in the world. Fantastic.
I'm sure. And I think we are all in a very lucky position, lucky place. It's our team who actually makes us. So
absolutely. There is no one, like I said, there is no one woman or one man army. Doesn't exist.
Even I would, agree, ma'am. This is what, I'm so proud of my team, as you say, and I would not lead any other team besides this.
Because,
so wonderful.
and our teams are, because I said schools are about people. And when they feel looked after, when they feel that, yes, they matter to you, and you have that faith and that credibility that, yes, you will walk with them. That if you are asking them to do 6 hours, you are putting in 12 hours, and that is the leadership. And, the other thing, Amrita, we learn as much from good leaders as we learn from bad leaders. True. We also learn what not to do.
Absolutely.
right? From poor leadership examples. And you have to, as a leader, I've always said, you always have to understand that you have to plan for your own figurative demise. You have to grow your own people.
Absolutely.
And you have to know that what is your legacy? What do you want to be remembered for?
Right.
You don't want, what is it that when you leave your institution, because there will come that time when you leave, how do you want people to remember you? You should guide how you behave with them while you're there. So to me, that's very simple, but I'm sure it is to you as well.
I just want to add once, I'm sure most of us have read about Jack Ma, and I was just reading about Jack Ma, and he said very rightly that the last about 10 years of his work, of course, he's still actively working, he's doing nothing. He's only planning his succession. And I think that's what a good leader is all about. Where you
absolutely, you have to grow. You have to grow people, because if you can't build capacity, then you really failed as a leader. You really have.
Because we have to prove to the world, prove to ourselves, in fact, believe that the institution is bigger than us. We are only a very small
and the legacy, I mean, what kind of legacy are you going to leave that the minute you walk out that door, the systems collapse?
You've been a bad leader.
That can't happen. There has to be sustainability. Absolutely. It was an absolute pleasure, Amrita, Aditya, entire team.
May I request?
Before we request Harsh, I just want to put on records that when you have bright stars like Aditya, teams go well. Thank you so much, Aditya. You were, as usual, a brilliant moderator. Over to you, and then Harsh.
Yeah. Harsh, sir, may I request you to please the final words?
I'll just give a vote of thanks to Vinita Uppal-ji. Thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us. I am Harsh Madhok, director of the group. Business operations, and pleasure. I'm actually a lot younger, so you don't have to call me sir.
Okay, so then I'll call you Harsh. Okay.
Harsh, yeah. So thank you so much for ma'am for being with us and enlightening our teachers, and it's been amazing to see all the things which you all are doing at this British school, and resource development, capacity development, and some of the things you said today, that there are some 4 pillars of having really good online learning. We really have something to ponder upon, and about how resource development and how bandwidth becomes a bit of an issue in small towns like Varanasi. So
I'm
we
sure
just
it does.
have to
absolutely, and those are challenges that will have to be kind of addressed in a circus tourist manner. We'll just have to address it, because we can't leave students out. We can't have any child being left behind. It's really taking a lot of our energy and resilience and innovation, and to keep this going and sustaining it. My worry is the bigger one, that 2 months, now 2, now 4, now 6, now 8, we don't know. And it is sustaining that quality that's going to be key. Thank you very much for your words. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Amrita. Thank you, Aditya. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Real
much.
pleasure.